The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck and Rico Lamitte, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Fan?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Oh, what's that, Rico?
Trip back to Plymouth. I took a trip back to Plymouth last night. It's crazy.
You took a trip black to Plymouth. Is that what you're telling me?
The witch hunts were crazy as a black man back then.
Oh boy!
Promise, I've seen it firsthand.
Oh boy! Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, November 24th, and today is your welcoming day, or excuse me, your welcome giving day. So you guys are supposed to give some stuff today, okay, and be happy about it.
The blackest of all Fridays, Jason.
Yes, exactly. It's also May's Day, Buy Nothing Day, even though everyone's going to buy something today. It's Black Friday, National Native American Heritage Day, and are you ready for this, Rico? It's also the National Day of Listening. Well. On that, thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. Use that fancy QR code somewhere on your screen to find out where we live on the internet, and we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, and now we are also streaming on Rumble, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. So welcome to anyone joining us from any of those additional audiences. But nonetheless, we are going to kick it off with the dope dad himself, Mr. Rico Lamitte, who, of course, cooks his turkey outside like all men do. That's right. It is the dope dad himself, Rico Lamitte.
Thank you. It's good to be back here on Earth, Jason.
I bet.
And, I don't cook turkey at all, man. I'm a
You
chicken
don't cook
man
turkey.
myself.
You just jive turkey.
I just jive all day. Nah, it goes with the gout thing, man. I can't eat turkey. So
some jive turkey, son.
Is what it is. But for today's story, I'd like to go to Maryland because Maryland's cannabis-friendly governor Wes Moore set the tone early upon taking office, promising not only that he'd legalize cannabis businesses within the state, but he'd also be prioritizing equitable access, making sure all communities would bear the fruit of the movement. Prince George County being the most divided within the state, made up of the poorest and most affluent black citizens in the nation at the same damn time. The time has come for residents to vote on how legalized weed game will look locally. And right on brand, PG County locals are divided. Per WTOP's reporting, Prince George County Council could not agree on tightening the rules for cannabis dispensaries on Wednesday. A bill presented would have limited where cannabis dispensaries could be located in the county to industrial areas and business parks, and needed 6 votes to pass, but they only got 5. 1 council member voted against it, and 2 council members abstained. The majority of residents who spoke at the meeting were all in favor of the bill. Jamil Adlim Johnson, president of the Prince George County's Muslim Council, voiced his concerns. Communities like ours take on too many vices, as what happens in many minority communities. We say it's going to be managed and enforced this way, but take a look at the smoke shops, take a look at the liquor stores. You take a look at now at even truck parking and how it's not being enforced. It's hard for many of us to believe this will be enforced properly and not be a detriment to the community. Tony Caffrey, standing in opposition, reminded the council that Maryland had a goal when it came to legalizing marijuana sales. He said this: the stated first priority of the legislature is to stamp out the illicit market so consumers have access to safe product. And this legislation runs counter to the state's objective. I agree, Tony. Council member Crystal Orjada said that it's common knowledge that sometimes communities in the Beltway are not treated equally. What is told to us is not honored by businesses. There is a conversation that all these stores will be nice. They'll look like Apple stores. They'll look like yoga studios. But the reality is, no one can guarantee the quality that will be in my community. When I go to the liquor store in my district versus the liquor store in Bowie or Laurel, all in Prince George counties, they look completely different. There's bulletproof glass at every liquor store in my district. The notion of my idea that every community is treated equally just is not true. She's also concerned about the oversaturation of harmful products in certain communities like liquor stores, tobacco shops, and fast food chains. The bill is asking for us to be mindful of the needs and outcry of those communities. They have made it clear they don't want to continue to see this oversaturation in their community. Please put them first for a change over industry. It's very refreshing to see, all these conservative black folks. And y'all don't believe me when I tell you about the East Coast and in the South, because it does exist. The one opposing vote came from Council Member Wanika Fisher. I do think this has negative impact on social equity applicants, our black and brown businesses. I think the conversation between legalization and zoning has been conflated during the entire conversation. We're not here to debate legalization. I also believe when you constrict it this way, the rent that black and brown businesses are going to be paying in very small selected zone is going to be extremely high. Supporters of the bill are hope to be able to get more members on the council to vote in favor and bring it back up for a vote in the new year. As legalization and decriminalization continues to expand nationwide, data is increasingly available regarding crime, home values, and more tied to residential areas close to cannabis operations. And so far, all are trending positively. So I know it's tempting to scratch the reefer madness itch, especially when you've been, conditioned for so long not to believe the truth. But personally, I think PG County dodged an economic bullet with this one not passing. But I'm interested in hearing the rest of y'all's thoughts. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street. Happy blackest of all Black Fridays, Jason. What do you think about this one?
Oh man, Rico. I mean, are you surprised? Are you surprised by any of this?
I think looking at it, like more conservative black communities and everything, you get to see across the bigger picture. It's more about economics and not as much. You have a bunch of whistleblowers and shit like that, like your favorite ex-president, but a lot of it is economics. It's not so much it has to do with race in certain areas. And we have so much data supporting, home values increasing and supporting communities being brought up and benefiting from the sale of cannabis in their zones, in their communities, in their counties. But you still have people like this saying like, oh, we don't want a bunch of weed shops in here looking like bulletproof liquor stores and tobacco shops. They just don't get it, and they're just not tuned into reality, in my opinion.
I mean, maybe they want them to look like yoga studios, like they said in the article, Rico.
It just sounds like their arguments sound a lot like
Maybe
the
they
first
just
year of Orange County. Does it not sound like Orange County?
maybe they just don't maybe they just don't want slumlords
California?
in their county.
I mean, the Orange County, California was saying the same shit. And then a couple of years later, after Santa Ana, the only place where they allowed cannabis to be recreational or adult use, excuse me, out here, everybody wants to add it now because they want a piece of that pie. They want a piece of that economic pie. And they're like, oh, it's not so bad after all, is it? And they want to jump on the bandwagon late.
Not every city in Orange County has added it. It's just Costa Mesa.
They are starting to evolve. Because they see everybody else getting that money.
They are evolving, and that takes time. And,
Yeah.
and with evolvement takes time. So I don't know why you're making such a big deal about it.
The problem is this.
What's that?
The problem is that we're comparing cannabis to alcohol, and that's the problem.
Yep.
The problem is that it's a bad comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Cannabis is not like alcohol, and this is my my problem with those who support the adult use recreational market is that they are misstepping here, trying to compare it like alcohol. It's going to be treated like alcohol, and here we go. Here's a county in Maryland that's treating it like alcohol and saying not in my backyard, when in fact it could be healing people in their community, but they're refusing it because of poor understanding of what cannabis is.
You're exactly right on that, Dr. Talleyrand, because there's a number of different advocates that advocate for the treat cannabis like alcohol method, and that is one of the big things that resonates with a lot of lawmakers.
Mm-hmm.
You have any?
Yeah, that's a problem.
You have any thoughts on this, Dale? Being an educator,
I'd like to think that we can like talk, walk, and chew gum at the same time. We need not criminalize adults for adult use, which is a harm reduction from most drugs we commonly consume, whether legal or not. That we need to continue research and legalize research and make research more accessible so that we can pharmaceuticalize and have that conversation. I think I was there in the room in the middle of the arguments back in 2009 with Colorado and California as we launched a public campaign. And the two arguments were, do we call it cannabis or marijuana? Cannabis wins. It's scientific. But at the time, they thought, are you pulling the wool over the eyes of the voters? Like, they thought that it was somehow, anyway. And the other question was, do we run that campaign that Colorado really, it was created with Steve Fox and Mason DeVert and Paul Armentano, that they wrote a book on it. It's a great book of, this is safer than alcohol. And for humans, it is a compare and contrast. This is how we absorb information, is compare and contrast. And cannabis, marijuana, weed, pot became this scary ghost monster that no one really knew, but everyone had in their own closet, but they couldn't talk about it. And it became so fearful for politicians, their staff, managers, and their teams, and of course, soccer moms in the voting booth. And so safer than alcohol, I think, was really effective in showing people this is legal, and what we're offering is safer than what you're familiar with being bought and sold. It used to be prohibited. Now it's not. We don't have bootleggers anymore, but bootlegging and a lot of these violent criminal cartels were created because alcohol was made illegal. And prohibition started and ended in 13 years. We could have that conversation juxtaposed to marijuana prohibition. Now, that does not at all take away from the entire conversation that these good doctors are talking about, which is equally important to continue that conversation. And how we ultimately cracked it was, this is medicine. And you shouldn't be cracking skulls while people are trying to save their children, themselves, their moms, their wives, their loved ones. But nobody ever saw that argument until someone they loved had that problem. And so we just have to keep having multiple conversations about this. There is no silver bullet.
There is no silver bullet.
There is not.
No.
And one more point about
and social equity is a big part of that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that, Dr. T?
One more point about the argument for looking at this as recreational versus medicinal. Aspirin is available over the counter. You can go and pick it up without a license, without a prescription, and cannabis can be the same. So if the argument is better access to make it recreational, that doesn't make sense to me either. Make it over the counter, make it so that you don't need a recommendation to pick it up, but call it what it is. It's really a medicinal product. It's not a recreational product.
Well, I think the word recreational is also problematic, Dr. Talleyrand, that what we really, it's adult use, medicinal use. We have responsible use at the core of all of this. That's really what we're just looking for, is responsible use, whatever you are using it for. The thing is unfortunately in our current American society, to put something through a pharmacy, which is currently how over the counter is usually sold, it's still just a freaking plant that we can grow in our backyard. And so I think we can walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time. I think that cannabis can be made safe and safely available. And if adults are consuming cannabis over alcohol, any doctor would agree, especially at this point. They're saying, yeah, remember that glass of wine? Maybe not even that. Like it's poison. And so if we can replace poison, whatever that happens to be, with cannabis, for me, it was tobacco. As a 17-year smoker, and that will kill me eventually. And so having that conversation of responsible use and adult use, and you don't necessarily have to go to a pharmacy for tobacco either. And tobacco will kill you. Aspirin will kill you. LD50 is what, around, at half a bottle of most. Yeah. So it's, many things we commonly consume can kill us. Water can kill us. It is about responsible use.
Water can kill you. I remember that. I remember that thing that they did on the radio station one time when they made a lady drink a whole bunch of water for a Nintendo 64 or something, and she ended up dying.
Yeah, that just happened.
Yeah, that was
a mother of 2 or 3, a poor mother of kids trying to just get something for her kids' Christmas, and now she's dead and they don't have a mother. Water can kill you. Stupidity can kill you. Hello, Darwin Awards.
That is so true. And on the stupidity kills, we're going to go to a commercial.
Or ignorance. Can I say ignorance kills?
I say stupidity.
How's it going, guys? Saman Razani coming to you from Green Street here with Jason Beck, smoking on the best weed in the world. Did you know that we have an audio-only version of our podcast available on Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify? Tune in now and check it out.
Oh man, they're telling me, Adam, in the chat. They're saying that my mic is down. Oh, they're saying that I'm good. Okay, all right. Adam says I'm good. You guys tell Adam something in the chat.
Your mic is fine.
I don't hear you, Rico. I think you're on mute, buddy. I think you're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
I'm fine with me.
I don't know. I don't hear Rico. But all right, Rico. I'm just gonna go into my story then, since you can't talk. I don't know what's going on with you, buddy. But here we go. And this is for you doctors, okay? Since we have 2 doctors today, I found a medical story for you guys. A genome study unveils genetic ties between cannabis use disorder and lung cancer risk. Now, just by the title, I feel that this is already written by some prohibitionists, but I want to see what the doctors have to say. In a recent study published by Nature Genetics, researchers conducted a genome-wide association study, GWAS, to gain novel insights into the pathophysiology of cannabis use disorder. Pathophysiology. Thank you, Dr. Mark. Pathophysiology of cannabis use disorder and public health concerns associated with the disorder. Cannabis is a psychoactive drug with a long history of illegal use. That paragraph doesn't matter. Recently, many countries throughout the world have approved the use of cannabis for medical purposes and decriminalized its adult use. In the United States, medical use of cannabis has been authorized in 37 states, whereas adult use cannabis is available in 19 states. With the recent changes in cannabis law, a gradual increase in the prevalence of cannabis use disorder has been observed worldwide, they say. A GWAS meta-analysis of cannabis use disorder was conducted using the Million Veteran Program database, which is one of the largest biobanks in the world that compiles with genetic, health, and lifestyle data to facilitate genetic research. Additionally, a meta-analysis was conducted on data obtained from 1,054,365 individuals of European, African, and mixed American and East Asian ancestries designated by the reference panel used for the assignment. Single nucleoid polymorphism, SNP, based habitually was calculated within each ancestry using population-specific methods. A total of 22 independent genome-wide significant GWS loci were identified within European ancestry. 2 GWS loci within African ancestry and GWS locus within admixed American ancestry and 2 GWS loci within East Asian ancestry. That's a lot of Lokis. The lead SMP for European ancestry was near the cholinergic receptor nicotinic alpha 2 submit encoding gene. For African ancestry, the lead SMP was in intron of gene that encodes for a pH-dependent proton-coupled amino acid transporter for glycine, aniline, and proline. For admixed American ancestry, the lead SNP was in an intergetic region downstream of the leucine-rich repeat containing 3B. For East Asian ancestry, the lead SMP was intronic to the symphorium 6D encoding gene. Comparative analysis of cannabis use disorder and cannabis use trials with a range of psychiatric and non-psychiatric traits showed a much more substantial overlap of cannabis use disorder with pathological and negative traits. The calculation of SMP-based herbality within each ancestral group identified significant SMP-based herbality for 3 larger ancestries, including European, African, and mixed American ancestries. The comparison of genetic correlations between cannabis use disorder and cannabis use revealed that the strongest positive correlations are related to smoking inhalation and alcohol dependence. Comparatively, the strongest negative correlations are related to the age of first intercourse and smoking cessation. Further analysis identified a bioretical causal relationship between cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia. Regarding the differences between the cannabis use and cannabis use disorder, the analysis showed that cannabis use disorder is much more closely associated with psychopathology. A unidirectional causal effect of multi-site chronic pain on cannabis use disorder was observed in the study, and this indicates that chronic pain might act as a driving factor for cannabis use disorder. The analysis further identified a unidirectional causal effect of cannabis use disorder on lung cancer. Conditional analysis of this result was smoking inhalation did not significantly alter the relationship between cannabis use disorder and lung cancer. However, the conditional analysis with cigarettes each day mitigated this relationship. A transcriptome-wide association study identified 36 and 15 genes using the adult and fetal brain fetal cortex expression, respectively DALR, anecdotocon binding domain containing 3 DALRD3 was the only common gene in these gene tests. Nonsense mutations in the gene are known to be associated with developmental delay and early onset epileptic encephalopathy. And the observed gene associations included 4 district GWAS loci, including DALRD3, both fetal and adult, and ERCC8 fetal, and RP11-629G13.1 in adults, and PLP-PP2 for adults. Proteins encoded by these genes are associated with various cancer types, including breast cancer, esophageal cancer, and multiple melanoma. The estationin of SMP-based herbality of cannabis use disorder showed significant enrichments for the fetal brain frontal cortex, but not for the adult brain cortex. This enriched fetal SMP-based herbality indicates that the development brain that in the developing brain, genetic factors might play a role in inducing cannabis use disorder, even in the absence of cannabis exposure. The study finds a significant difference between cannabis use and cannabis use disorder, and genetic liabilities to cannabis use disorder exhibit a much stronger association of psychopathology and disability. Notably, the study finds a causal link between cannabis use disorder and lung cancer risk. Well, I just read a whole bunch of stuff that I would love some in-depth intellectual knowledge on from our two esteemed doctors that we have on here on the panel. And thank you so much, doctors, for your help with some of those words.
I don't know what I just read.
Hit the applause button for making it through that that article, Jason. You did a great job.
Amazing. That's what I'm talking about.
Where's the applause button? There should be an
I
applause
don't know,
button.
Adam, they're asking for the applause button, Adam. There we go. Adam
there
is
we
on
go.
it. Yes.
So,
There we go.
Dr. Gene, you want me to take this?
Go for
Let me
it. Go
start?
for it.
Okay. Yeah. So this is super interesting and really cool on what they're doing in terms of trying to read correlations between cannabis use disorder. I always think of, okay, what is that exactly? Well, that's just stoners. Okay. So stoners. So whenever you hear cannabis use disorders, or disorder, just insert, the word stoners in there. It's okay. What are they looking at? And so this SNP, or these things called single nucleotide polymorphism, which is just a fancy word for a marker in a piece of DNA. And what they do when they do these, what was the other acronym you used? GWAS is a genome-wide association study, where what they look for are correlations between, again, I guess, a population of stoners, people who suffer from cannabis use disorder. And what they see is they start to see correlations. And I really like that this crosswise correlation to cancer susceptibility is really, really cool, because now you're kind of looking at like how cannabis acts on the human genome to kind of reprogram it, or maybe again just to send off little alarm signals to physicians like Dr. Talleyrand around patient susceptibility towards certain diseases, cancer in particular, which would be really cool, because then you would look at maybe other symptoms and say, hey, we shouldn't ignore that. Let's have a CAT scan done, or let's, look at this patient a little bit more in depth. But I think this is just the beginning of what they can do with, everyone's talked about like genomic analysis, and it's not so much reading the information, because we do have now the sophisticated tools and things like CRISPR and all these other acronyms that win people Nobel Prizes and things like that. But these things have great utility in the arena of medicine to look at real unknown between kind of like cannabis and cannabis use, is how our own bodies, which are expressing the receptors that cannabis and the cannabinoids bind with, is just really such an important piece of the puzzle. And I think studies like this will help scientists and doctors and medical professionals really understand not just cannabis use disorder. I think that's just kind of like a bullshit term for, again, stoners, people who use a lot of cannabis, but to understand what that does at the genetic level and how that influences different susceptibilities to diseases. But I'd be great to hear from Dr. Talleyrand if he agrees with what I'm saying here.
Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, the reason for genetic testing is really to predict, right? I mean, in the practical real world, we want to be able to predict if you're going to have a negative outcome from something. But using genetics alone is problematic, because there are what we call epigenetic factors outside your DNA. And for those who have trouble understanding, think about a blueprint for building a house or remodeling a house. Often you have a blueprint, but when you actually go and do the remodeling, it doesn't actually completely follow the blueprint. There's real world, and there's the DNA, right? And looking at the real world is important. So when you think about cannabis use disorder and their ability to say that 10 to 30% of the population has cannabis use disorder, but when you actually look at the real world, you don't see that. You don't see people having problems with cannabis. Then you just have a poor definition already, and then trying to link it with genes just makes it poor on top of poor. I'm not a big fan of this study. This came out of Yale, and I have concerns, that Yale is being funded by the pharma industry and is looking to pull out negative information on cannabis.
I'm with that.
But yeah.
So Dr. T labels this as a prohibitionist piece.
Well, and the editor
think-
didn't. Sorry, I was just going to add the editor didn't help, and I'm blaming the editor because it's usually the editor that chooses the headline. That at the very end it says, "Oh, and there was not causal, but a casual link," and that becomes the headline of it's lung cancer. I'm just can we just even aim for any semblance of accuracy in the headline that never gets pulled back? It's the headline that is the jolt to the system that everybody points to, not the retraction, not showing that the metadata studies actually excluded anything that showed anything positive as far as results, and also only studied people with problems instead of all the other people that had no problems that raised their hand because they didn't to be a part of this study. It's just frustrating as all get out.
Well, that and the well-established 40-year study of Dr. Donald Tashkin at UCLA, which basically proved exactly the opposite of what the government intended it for it to prove, which is that, like cigarette smoking cannabis was going to lead to lung cancer. And what he found was that people who smoked cannabis had lower incidence of lung disease from people who don't smoke anything at all.
It's protective.
Yep.
Same with alcohol.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Describes the prophylactic properties that these compounds have when inhaled into the lungs. Now, that doesn't mean, and Dr. Talleyrand, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't mean that smoking weed can cure cancer. It does not mean that. But it does mean in a statistically significant, and this wasn't in mice neither, this was in humans, which is great, funded by our tax dollar, right? By NIDA, because they wanted to prove it to be bad, right? And they found that it wasn't bad at all. So, I mean, yeah.
And even in this study, I thought I read a sentence in the, not the study, but your story that even said that something about, tobacco use might have played a part. And that's the other issue with a lot of these studies is they don't account for tobacco use at all. And then they point to the cannabis as part of the problem when it was the tobacco that they were also smoking, or the blunt, which I try to explain in class is once you wrap it in tobacco, you're smoking tobacco.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. T, I totally hear what you're saying about it being done at Yale and certainly Connecticut, big cradle of the pharmaceutical industry. But here's my thinking. People are using cannabis, and this population that they studied, this cannabis use disorder, those are stoners. They're linking this now genetically to enzymes. I mean, think about it. This is kind of like the outside-in insult of these compounds into the human body. And what these folks are reading genetically is how is the body at a genetic level reacting to it. As a scientist, I'm like, cool, we need to know that because, is it efficacious against certain aspects of cancer because you're getting cannabinoids into the fatty tissues of your body where free radicals can do damage? I mean, absolutely. And that's why we say the underpinnings of all cannabis use is medical because of this antioxidant, anti-inflammatory activity that you get no matter how you use cannabis. But at the end of the day, and I agree with what you're saying, is that, if they're trying to draw some, connection between cannabis use and cancer, I mean, that train's left the station years ago, and that ain't happening.
Exactly, revisionist. Go ahead.
They want us to make that connection. They can't, sir.
And yet they still do.
They still try.
Nick in the chat, he's saying that he brought up the U.S. Health Department patent on cannabis as a neuroprotectant, and they told me I was wrong.
No, they actually have 2 patents on
It's
that.
expired now. It expired
They
this year.
renew? Oh, I thought they renewed. They didn't renew this
Well,
year.
I don't know if the new one's expired. I know that the classic one from 2003, the neuroprotectants that they filed. The ironic thing about that is that they smuggled the cannabinoids into Bethesda from Meshulam's lab back in the 60s to do that initial work. So they broke their own laws to basically get that work done. So.
Doctor,
but it also shows, and Dale, you bring up a great point, because the U.S. Patent Office doesn't give a shit about drug policy or drug law. When they find an invention, they found that these things had this neuroprotective properties. And part of the neuroprotective properties is, again, these cannabinoids act as antioxidants to quench reactive oxygenated species, which lead to free radical mediated damage that often underpins cancer growth. So it's just beautiful that the government itself has demonstrated medical use when Schedule 1 says there is no demonstrated medical use. So how could the plant from which these compounds are derived still be Schedule 1, claiming no medical use, when the USPTO, a different branch of the government, has independently said these things have medical use because they have neuroprotective properties?
And in regards with this, Dr. Talleyrand, Nick in the audience has a quick question for you. He says that his neurologist has told him 5+ times that cannabis causes seizures, and he says that he asked him where he's taken if he's taken further education on cannabis, and he wouldn't answer him, and just doubled down that cannabis causes seizures, and basically said, "I've been doing this for 25 years, and you should listen to me."
His doctor told him that he's been being a doctor for 25 years.
Yeah. That he's been a doctor doing this for 25 years, and he should listen to him, and basically not. And so
what I would say is that the medical, practicing for 25 years, the medical establishment has not acknowledged the endocannabinoid system or done any work on educating on the endocannabinoid system. And so I wouldn't look to his doctor, his neurologist, as an expert in phytocannabinoids or the endocannabinoid system, unless he's looked outside of medicine and looked at the science, then he's not speaking from a place of authority.
All right, and I'm getting asked
just because you've been doing something 25 years don't make you good at it.
That's right.
Well, and my point was practice. You need to keep practicing and keep learning. And there's, if you go by what he learned 25 years ago in medical school, then he's probably not a great doctor if he isn't staying on top of new information. Find another doctor is my recommendation.
He would be considered like a politician that is unwilling to evolve. But on that, I'm getting told we got to go to a commercial. We're going to be right back.
I'm Jason Beck, and this is Smoky Vanilla. And if you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to get yourself a stretch and smoke with Smoky Vanilla.
That's right, baby. I'm Smoky Vanilla with my background in kinesiology. I'm a sports massage therapist and stretch coach. I focus mostly on athletes who have chronic pain or injury due to their sport, or the legends of the chronic in the game, baby.
Oh, yeah, you know what it is? We just stretched, and now we're gonna smoke, because you know what it is.
That's right. I love intuitively creating a session based on the individual I'm working with. We'll go through a few assessments, look at the past health history, injury, or anything that's still affecting you today, and create a customized session just for you. Let's go. Woo!
We're gonna roll right into Dr. Gene. We're a little behind time, so we're gonna roll right into Mr. Dr. Gene Talleyrand. He's the founder of CESC and the founder of Medican, where you can get your medical cannabis recommendations, so that way you can be a patient too. That's right, it's none other than Dr. Gene Talleyrand.
Thank you, Jason. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving with family and friends. So while you were deciding whether to have turkey or stuffing, South Dakotans have been thinking about mandating medical cannabis education to dispensary employees. My headline today is from Inside Higher Ed. South Dakota College proposes cannabis education requirement by Catherine Palmer. South Dakota voters approved medical cannabis in 2020. but the industry still has critics. Can an education program for cannabis dispensary workers improve the industry's credibility? Benjamin Valdez, Vice President of Academics at Southeast Technical College in Sioux Falls, presented the preliminary idea to the state legislators' Medical Cannabis Oversight Committee earlier this month. The proposed certificate curriculum would include courses on medical cannabis laws, pharmacology, ethics, compliance and dispensing, and a capstone where students would demonstrate their knowledge in an industry setting. Valdez told the committee, if we are to ensure the safety of citizens of South Dakota and of this narcotic as it's being dispensed in the form of medication, we are advocating that we look at some form of education for these individuals. Valdez said that as far as he knows, South Dakota would be the only state to require formal education for dispensary workers. Currently, the state's administrative rules require all dispensary employees to receive training on record keeping, safety, and security protocols, but don't specify further training requirements. According to state data, there are more than 12,000 registered medical cannabis patients in more than 90 dispensaries in South Dakota. Though voters approve medical cannabis, Governor Kristi Noem has characterized cannabis as a social ill and opposed any form of legislation. Voters also approve recreational cannabis, but Noem authorized a lawsuit arguing nullification of the recreational cannabis amendment because of the state's constitution requires addressing only one subject at a time. Valdez has no position on whether the state should approve recreational cannabis, but is more concerned about educating the industry and the public. Through education, we can ensure that we have those best practices and safety components in place. Lawmakers questioned the logistics of the educational requirement. How would the education be delivered? And would dispensaries be temporarily shut down as its employees earned the certificates? Valdez told the committee that his college has the capacity to teach the courses in person, hybrid, or online, but deferred to the legislators on whether the dispensaries would need to shut down as its employees took the course. Char Gamble, CEO of Emerald Consulting, is supportive of the concept, but has concerns that the training curriculum might require too much time to complete. Kittrick Jeffries, owner of multiple dispensaries in the state, is also concerned about a backlog of employees needing certificates prior to hire. Jeffries feels medical professionals should be required to take the training rather than the $12 to $18 entry-level employees. There's a lot of nuance in helping patients and finding out what products best fit their debilitating conditions, but that relationship goes back to their doctors, he said. Higher education should never be mandated for entry-level staff. California's Oaksterdam University offers more than 25 courses on various aspects of cannabis and the industry. However, the courses are not mandated in California. Over the years, the focus on medical cannabis has dissipated as adult use recreational laws limit dosage, raise taxes, and make cannabis less accessible to the medical patient. South Dakota is considering a proposal to legitimizing cannabis by mandating education. Is this a good move? What do you think? This is Dr. Jean Talleyrand with High at 9 News.
Well, I think Dale could speak to this the best. I think a lot of it depends on who you're going to have as the educators that are going to teach these programs and really educate what's real and what's not.
They were describing what we already do. Have I mentioned the Budtender's Guide? Yeah. I think that education is crucial, but shutting down businesses over something that is honestly not that dangerous, I think, is a bridge too far. So yes, some level of education. I am surprised California has not mandated. They are not the first. Utah requires it. Maryland, there's several that require it. But it's, yeah, I appreciate the name drop in the article. We would be happy. Shout out to my husband, born and bred in South Dakota. So trusted. And yeah, more power to him for recommending education. What I'm looking for here is the basics to maintain public health and safety. Just like food service, this is more about people understanding proper handling, wash your hands after you touch your ass kind of stuff. Like this is just basic food safety and recommendations around not over consuming, especially when it comes to edibles, which I feel are probably the most dangerous for novice consumers and those around them when they're trying.
Why has that not happened here in California, Dale?
Great question. Great question.
Well, it can't happen at universities unless they have a Schedule One license. If it's a plant touching thing, they need a Schedule One license, and then all the weed has to come from the University of Mississippi swag grow.
Whoa. You don't need weed to teach. Don't be a dumbass, though. Like, you don't need actual.
I'm just saying, if you're looking to teach plant touching and, horticulture and production and extraction and analysis and all the business stuff that Dale's referring to, but
that all shouldn't be required, right? That's the medical, or that's the market deciding, how much do they want to invest and what kind of PhDs they want to hire depending on what they're.
Yeah, so my story from last week was Minnesota, and what they promised that they can do in Minnesota is actually do testing on products that are currently available in Minnesota. So it'll be interesting how much they could push that limit in terms of education.
Yeah, this is a public health, a safety concern. It's not to benefit the industry, it's to benefit the patients or the consumers, right? Whether you consider yourself a patient or not. And that's what needs to be cautioned. I mean, we are seeing increase in people coming into emergency rooms, especially elderly. This is what we're trying to prevent as an industry and as a society. And so it's, some basic education might do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the good news is most of even though there's an increase in reported in the emergency room, that they're walking out afterwards, unlike many of the other drugs that put people into the emergency room where they have, whether it's intractable liver damage or other problems from that overdose. That is, it's good that we're able to finally be honest with the medical profession and not just get tossed in jail for having used it. The per se criminality.
You know who I really wonder their thoughts on this whole thing? Because you said this is South Dakota, right, Dr. T?
That's right.
I want to know what Governor Kristi Noem thinks about this.
I hope to talk to her. Let me put that in the universe. Hi, Kristi. I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, we would.
Yeah,
love
maybe
to
she can call on her good trusted advisor Herschel Walker. He can fly out there and give her some facts about
the article says
clearly being lobbied by someone.
The article says she considers it a social ill. Cannabis.
She's not a fan.
I know she does. That's why I'm wondering what she thinks about this.
This is a gift from God, Kristi. Don't question. This is a gift from God. It is man that made this illegal. It's probably Democrats, as a matter of fact.
It probably was. I agree with you on that.
Mad ill.
Yes. All right, Rico, you ready?
Are we ready?
Yep.
Let's keep it rocking.
Let's roll.
So this highly recognized expert in organic chemistry specializes in natural product chemistry, plant oil extraction, analysis, and chemical modification. And you know what? He always brings us the mad science to close out the hour each Friday. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Mark Staldone.
Thank you, Rico. Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you had a great holiday. Didn't eat too much food. And, happy... what can I say? Happy Black Friday. It's
African American Friday. It's
African American Friday.
Boy, you guys, happy Black Friday, everybody. Make sure you spend some money.
This is one of those times where black is good. Like in our vernacular, because it's always like they always say black is bad, oh it's dark, oh it's scary. No, black means you're making money. It's dollar bills.
Yes,
you're in the black.
Dollar bill, that's right. Shout out for capitalism.
Friday. I'm no longer using African American as Afro American because I have an Afro. I'm not African, so you can take that.
Oh boy! All right, Dr. Mark.
I have a black hat and I have black hair, so
I got two black hats. I got nothing.
Yeah, wear your black today. But again, my story today comes from Vaping 360. It's about our favorite THC isomer, Delta 8. And it's entitled Delta 8 Gets a Reprieve as the 2018 Farm Bill is extended to 2024. Let's see, do the math. What's 24 minus 18? Oh my God, that's 4 years. So 4 years without passing a farm bill. Okay, so the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized hemp production in the United States has been extended until September 30th, 2024. Wow, quite a ways into that year. The extension is part of a short-term government funding bill signed into law November 16th by President Biden that protects the legal status of hemp-derived cannabinoids like Delta-8 THC for at least one more year. The 2018 Farm Bill had been scheduled to expire this year on September 30th. Congress, in the 2018 law, unwittingly created a major market for hemp-derived cannabinoids, hemp-derived intoxicants, that in some states compete with state-regulated marijuana and compete with, they say it here, black market weed everywhere. Ooh. Both non-intoxicating CBD products and psychoactive hemp-derived cannabinoids like Delta-8 and HHC, amongst others, have flourished under the protection of the 2018 law, which legalized not just hemp production, but also the substances naturally found in hemp, except Delta-9 THC. The 2018 Farm Bill specifically legalized the plant Cannabis sativa L and any part, including seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, i.e. THC concentration not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. Last year, federal appeals court confirmed that Delta-8 THC is legal under the wording of the bill, and even the Drug Enforcement Administration has conceded that cannabinoids naturally found in hemp can be sold without concern over federal enforcement, but state laws do vary. What is in the Farm Bill and why does it matter? The Farm Bill, actually called the Agricultural Improvement Act, is one of the largest, most complex piece of legislation Congress considers, almost in the same league as the defense and budget bills. The bill is renegotiated renewed every 5 years. Oh, okay. So here it says it renewed every 5 years, and we're only within that 4 year window. That makes me feel better. Hemp and related issues are just a tiny sliver of the bill. Among other things, it sets federal policy of agriculture, nutrition, conservation, and forestry. The Farm Bill includes expenditures on nutritional assistance, commodity supports, agricultural disaster assistance, and crop insurance subsidies. Because the bill's scope and the financial impact, it attracts attention from a huge number of lobbyists and special interest groups with a broad range of concerns. It was the bill in 2014 that created the pathway for farmers to legally produce hemp for the first time since 1970, but in 2018, the bill removed regulatory control of hemp from the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, and handed it to the Department of Agriculture, the USDA. Delta-8 is on the chopping block in next year's Farm Bill. Few members in Congress who supported legalizing hemp in 2018 knew that the action would create a legal industry built around intoxicating hemp-derived cannabinoids. But now they know. And if they don't, a law enforcement, anti-drug, and marijuana lobbyists will be pointing it out to them soon. Over the next year, Congress will negotiate and debate the Farm Bill, which will likely include some changes in hemp regulations. Interestingly, it's not just cannabis prohibitionists that want the new laws to crack down on the psychoactive hemp industry. Some groups that represent state-regulated marijuana businesses would also like to rein in the sales and manufacturing of intoxicating hemp products. Various pro and anti-cannabis groups are lobbying with a variety of new hemp bills in or new hemp rules in the next farm bill. These, among other changes, have been so far suggested. Increasing the allowable amount of THC in hemp to 1%, where it is rather now at 0.3%. Some say suggesting allowable levels to 1%, but including all cannabinoids in the total amount allowed, including THCA in the total level, or the allowable level of delta 9 THC in hemp, banning hemp-derived cannabinoids completely, or limiting legality to cannabinoids that are actually extracted from hemp plants, regulating all forms of THC in the same way, raising the legal age to purchase any cannabinoid to 21, requiring the FDA to regulate CBD in food and dietary supplements, eliminating DEA testing requirements for farmers growing hemp solely for industrial purposes, primarily for fiber, and relaxing bank regulations for hemp farmers and businesses. Lobbying will shift into high gear when Congress returns into session in January, and legislative proposals for updating the new farm bill will begin to take shape soon thereafter. So that's the story. It's pretty much just kicking the can down the road, which is going to allow this part of the market just to continue to flourish, in spite of some of the lawsuits we heard and stories earlier in the week, like from Meg Sanders and the folks in Massachusetts, as well as the group in California, where a group of Southern California dispensaries have got together and are filing a class action lawsuit against some hemp-derived product manufacturers. But that's the story. Be interested in what you guys have to say about this, and happy Friday from the great state of Vermont.
Happy Integrated Friday to you, Dr. Mark. Jason, Jason, your favorite line here is like, "Oh yeah, the farm bill, the new farm bill's coming. The new farm bill's coming." Sounds like it's gonna be more of the same. The status quo.
You know what?
I
I think you're right, Rico. I think you're right about this one, because every time when I was hearing everything that Dr. Mark was saying, it made me think that, oh, this is just going to be more of the same. And apparently, the hemp lobby got some good lobbyists now.
Well, and isn't it true that the USDA's regulation, which is the Farm Bill, runs out at harvest? So if that hemp has already been deemed hemp, and then that goes off to some processor and turned into CBD isolate, how does that fix converting CBD isolate by people who never touch a plant at all, who are just playing, chemical manufacturer in a warehouse somewhere, and are converting CBD into THC chemically? I mean, they didn't anticipate that, and I think, we've been through this before, but I guess this is really regulation that you can't look for the Farm Bill to solve. It's in the FDA's bailiwick, because once harvest happens, that corn becomes food, right? And
Right.
so for Del Monte to sell cans of food, or cans of corn, they have to have an FDA registered food production facility that's regulated by the FDA to make sure people aren't getting sick from eating cans of corn in their corn casserole for Turkey Day.
Yeah.
But think of it like this: like if the FDA actually regulated after harvest, there would be regulation for what you do with that hemp, bring it to use in markets where humans are going to consume it or come in contact with it. Mm-hmm. They've dropped the ball on that. It has nothing to do with the Farm Bill at all, right?
I think you could be right about that. They definitely have dropped the ball, and there's definitely a big lack of enforcement. They're just basically letting anything go when it comes to hemp, it seems like to me.
It has everything to do with optics. That's it.
Yeah, that is so true. We're going to keep this show going. We got one more story for you guys. We have, that's right, the Chancellor herself, Miss Amsterdam University, keeping up. Oh, Miss Oaksterdam. It was Miss Oaksterdam University. My bad. Miss Oaksterdam University
Drunk on
herself,
turkey.
who is constantly showing us how to keep up with the Joneses. That's right. It is none other than Dale Sky Jones.
Mrs. Jones, if you're nasty. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you each and every day, my friend. And while many Americans just celebrated Thanksgiving, it is crucial to remember the rich history of our native peoples of this land. My family lives in Oakland on Ohlone native lands. And my story comes to you by Ashley Southall at the New York Times. 4 young Black men like Justin Sullivan growing up in Harlem in the 2000s came with regular harassment from the police, making it risky to use cannabis. But when he started making white friends who also smoked weed, he learned that they were not under the same scrutiny. And that is when I started seeing how I was vilified for cannabis, Mr. Sullivan, now 34, said in an interview. Included with New York's legalization of cannabis in 2021 was a central promise to give back to communities that were most harmed by the war on drugs. And now state cannabis regulators have created an interactive map from 1.2 million marijuana arrests conducted across the state over the last 4 decades as a guide to which neighborhoods qualify. Mr. Sullivan's distressing experience could give him an advantage as he seeks one of at least 1,000 licenses that cannabis regulators in New York State plan to hand out early next year in a broad expansion of the legal market. Harlem, once a hotbed of drug arrests, is pinpointed in the mapping tool as a leading candidate for redress. New York set a goal for half of all licenses to be awarded to applicants from the hardest hit neighborhoods, along with women, racial and ethnic minority applicants, distressed farmers, and service-disabled veterans. Regulators will use the map to help determine if applicants qualify as belonging to a disproportionately affected community. And it serves as a clear reminder of how drug enforcement arrests in New York have been concentrated in low-income Black and Latino communities. This wasn't darts on a wall, said Tabitha Robinson. She is the Director of Economic Development Policy and Research of the Office of Cannabis Management. This state agency released the mapping tool last month and regulates the adult use market. Across the country, from California to Massachusetts, similar efforts to make the industry more inclusive have struggled. It has been no different in New York, where an interim dispensary licensing program has been halted since August by a lawsuit from veterans who say they were illegally excluded. Researchers who put together the mapping tool analyzed the home addresses of all people arrested in New York State from 1980 through 2021. Enforcement in some neighborhoods was as much as 10 times higher than it would have been if arrests had been evenly distributed across the state, according to the state's chief equity officer for cannabis. New York City accounted for the most arrests, about 1 million. The places with the most disproportionate arrest rates were all in the city, a jagged stretch of Brownsville, a boxy tract anchored by a major public hospital in East Flatbush, and a triangular expanse of East Harlem surrounding the Robert F. Wagner houses. Arrests in the city were highest in the 2000s and early 2010s, during the peak era of stop and frisk, a period when police conducted millions of mostly unlawful stops targeting Black and Latino men. Researchers have found stark racial disparities in arrests that could not be fully explained by the police's persistent claims that they were driven by emergency calls and community complaints versus racial bias. While the sum of marijuana arrests contributing to the map is staggering, it may be missing millions more encounters. This data set does not include stops where officers issued criminal summons or wrote tickets for small infractions where they took no action at all, or where they used marijuana as a pretext, but the stop did not result in a marijuana charge. And we all remember the stop and frisk, and the second you pull it out of the pocket, it becomes a crime. Mr. Fagone acknowledged the map's limitations, but he said he still believed it's captured the areas most harmed by marijuana arrests and provided people who have lived in those places with a pathway into the legal industry. The state designated 40% of cannabis sales tax revenues to fund reinvestment grants in the places where arrests were high. People who have lived for certain periods in those areas can get priority considerations for business licenses, discounts halving cutting in half the application and licensing fees and financial assistance, training, and help with operations. Besides serving as a guide, the map will also serve to track whether the state is keeping its commitments. The urban studies professor at the University in Buffalo, Henry Louis Taylor, said the map will help determine whether businesses and job opportunities in the cannabis industry are flowing to where they're needed most. It will also be useful for assessing whether future investment initiatives like job training and healthcare programs make a meaningful difference. Dale's side note, so would help with small children, early education and early child care assistance. We're able to see whether or not and to what extent these communities are going to benefit from the legalization of cannabis. And so I think this is a hugely important and significant opportunity. These cannabis sales that these initiatives depend on have lagged amid New York's slow and chaotic rollout. Only 27 adult use dispensaries have opened across the state since last December, although those sales have already reached 83 million in the first 9 months with the help of the new farmers markets. I strongly encourage folks to continue reading. Mr. Sullivan in particular is kind of an interesting story because he wants to open a dispensary in the barber shop that they've owned in Harlem for nearly 60 years. That would be on Frederick Douglass Boulevard in the stretch of Harlem where cannabis arrest rates have been 4 to 6 times higher than the state average. And while he's never been arrested as a Harlem resident, and of course having black skin, he has definitely had interactions with law enforcement. And he is what the state would call a legacy dealer, someone who's part of the marijuana industry before legalization. And this is a group that officials are keen on drawing into the legal market. So after his grandfather opened the barber shop and migrated from Georgia, became a successful business person, he was sent to prison for 6 years in the late 70s on charges that included marijuana distribution. And Harlem has changed quite a bit since then. His neighborhood is disappearing, and they're lucky to have the privilege of having space. And so it's important that we all support folks just like this to be able to use their space and place to be a part of the legal industry, says the peanut gallery sitting in this chair. I also plan to be in New York City. So if you're in the sound of my voice and you are also in New York City next weekend, I mean, that's like a week from Sunday, December 3rd, we will be screening and having a lovely after party for American Pot Story Oaksterdam. We will be at Regal Union Square. So Union Square on 12/3, in the middle of the afternoon, red carpet's at 3:30. And I hope to see you here. This little thing right there works. If you've got it on your screen, you can just scan it and get tickets. So hopefully I will see you soon, New York City. I love you. Thank you.
Dale Scott Jones, y'all. Dale Scott Jones.
Yes. I mean, what do you think about this?
I think we should be showing more of these maps over and over and over again to remind people.
How much do you
the
think
shit was disproportionate? If you have way more white people in white neighborhoods that are statistically more drug users and drug dealers, then they're not getting arrested and they're not heavily policed. If you show people these visuals, maybe it'll start getting through to them. And they'll start understanding why the struggle is so disproportionate in our neighborhoods, and the struggles that we have to go through is not the same. So
this is how we got cops, moms, and the NAACP on board back in 2010. Were a lot of maps that Drug Policy Alliance and other groups helped us do to show what was really these disproportionate arrests that were happening in California, and that triggered a whole series of actually taking a look. And you're right, people are visual, and those facts don't lie.
How much do you think this study cost?
This particular study?
Mm-hmm. Just an estimate. I know it didn't say in the article. I'm just wondering just how much do you estimate?
Well, this is data, right? So you're not having to go ask people necessarily. You're going backwards and looking at
historical instances and like compiling all the data, but that's still
probably $500,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of data entry.
It's probably $500,000 by the time they were done.
Interesting. $500,000.
And how much money can be generated from that? You know what I'm saying? That's an investment.
Mm-hmm.
It's
in the
part of the
beginning.
beginning of the investment into these communities. You have to identify who has been disproportionately affected to then be able to inject help. And I'm just here to ask that the help that these communities get isn't only in the form of, we'll teach you entrepreneurship, because that is such a tiny percentage of the population that what we need to be doing is investing in the base of these communities and the safety nets of these communities. That's where these tax dollars need to go, not in, anyway, it's workforce is where most of the people need to be, jobs with dignity.
Yes.
That they don't
Talk
have
your
to
shit,
Dale,
Dale.
have you
Talk
been
your
in New
shit,
York?
Dale.
Have you
Love
been
it.
in New York since they've legalized, like New York City, like Manhattan?
I have not spent near enough time. I feel like everywhere I just left just legalized. Everywhere I've
Yeah,
lived.
While
I
Dale's
mean-
out there, she's going to be frequenting all the trap shops.
It's time to
Yeah,
go.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jason, that's the truth is
2019
that
is the last time, yeah.
is that just
Midas
down
touch.
the block from Harlem, where we were at, which is Midtown Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
There were you could look up and down the street and see 20 trap shops. I'm telling
Shout
you,
out
they just
Happy Monkey. Shout out Happy Monkey. Yes, that
Oh,
is the last
yeah.
place I was in New York City.
they're everywhere.
Shout out Vlad, Ramon,
Yes.
David.
I just
Through
talked
the
to them
whole
2 days ago
crew.
because they're going to be on
My
Friday,
guys.
on Sunday.
You
They're
know
going to
what?
be with us.
You know
Yeah.
what's funny is I was spending some Thanksgiving time with some friends and family, and one of these family members that I hadn't seen since I usually only see him around Thanksgiving. Usually, they told me that they knew Vlad, and I was like, get the fuck out of here! What a small world.
Who doesn't know Vlad?
What
You
a
know,
small
Vlad,
world.
when I walked into
International
Happy
Vlad.
Monkey, it reminded me so much of old Oaksterdam, and they were one of the first to actually let in public officials and their staff and news cameras, and it's desensitizing, destigmatizing, introducing people that this is not as scary as you think it is. It's just a bunch of people in a room safely consuming cannabis, just like the bar down the street, like except less fights and cigarettes. So it is really not that scary, and that's why I really shout out Happy Monkey, is because they were brave enough to put themselves out there early when it was still very dangerous, and there's a lot just like
I advised him to do that early on.
oh, as
Yes.
did I.
Yeah.
I was, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People think
Yeah,
you'd be
they're
like stumbling into it like an opium den or something like that. Like you'll be very, very surprised.
Yep.
Yeah.
We are well over time today. Great discussion today. Always a pleasure on Fridays. We have the most cerebral, forward-thinking minds in the industry getting high at 9 with us.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you all for joining us for yet another episode. You can catch us live weekdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, high noon on the East Coast. Big shout out to our super fans showing love, getting their comments posted live on the big screen, to our live audience and online supporters catching us across all media platforms, tuning in each day. To our vetted correspondent team tuning in from all over, thank you guys for such a great conversation today. To our production team, Cloud Media Partners, all of our sponsors keeping the lights on and our AV struggles to a minimum. Always Cannabis Sativa L, the reason we show up to read these stories every day. Thank you. It has been Friday, such a diverse and equitable Friday.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
November 24th, 2023. Show's over. You've all been blessed with the top industry headlines. Hope it's enough for you to put in your pipe and smoke at least until Monday. Dr. T, what you got for us today, my man? You're gonna leave us with a great message for people.
Thanks, Rico. Thanks, everyone. Let's see. Well, let's remember that we're not going to get anywhere without education. That's where it all begins. So open up a book, read an article, and be critical.
And not all education is created equal, right, Dr. T?
That's why you got to be critical.
Yes.
Yeah, ask questions.